This tutorial will cover basics for writing simple Java application. A Java program can run from command prompts, but there are several available Java integrated development environments called IDE. And this kind of development environments, they simplify the development of Java program. Code in this example will be written in the NetBeans IDE, which you can see opened on my screen. And we will create a new project called Hello World. Over here on the left-hand side of NetBeans application, we got Hello World, which is the name of a project. And then we have a source packages. So for example, right now it's on the one package, Hello World, but there could be multiple ones, Hello World 1, 2, and 3, and so on. The name is predetermined by programmer. Within that package, we have a file called hello world.java, and this is where the basic source code goes. Once you open this whole hello world Java, you can see it displayed on this panel. NetBeans builds in the default wording to it, so that this kind of basic part will be covered by the program without interfering with the user, so that it's going to simplify our coding in future. It pre-populates with certain words. So in the beginning, for example, you see it's this class that we are creating, public class hello world, we'll talk about it in a moment, is stored or belongs to hello world package. And you can see it shows up here on the left-hand side. And all of those words such as public class, public static void, all of those are called keywords or reserved words. Also notice that we have a comment on top. So this comment, it's getting ignored by compiler. You can put any kind of details, any kind of clarifications, because imagine if your code is being written by many programmers. In order for you to understand what each part of application is doing, then it's easier to kind of say that, kind of comment out and say, so this is what's going on, and you would understand in the future if you need to revisit your code, or whoever is going to be looking at your code is going to make things much simpler. So once again, we got keywords, or called reserved words, and those words have a special meaning. They are part of the Java programming language. Notice that all of them are written in lowercase, and all of them are used with a very specific purpose. You should know the meaning and usage of commonly used keywords. There are a lot of keywords, but as you practice writing a code, majority of those words will come to you naturally, just because you're going to be using it a lot, and practice makes it perfect. So let's take a look here. So we have this line. So notice that lines are numbered by NetBeans. So for example, it goes from 1 to 15. This line is empty, but some lines actually contain code. Sometimes you want to create a little bit of spacing between each line for readability, but you will get your own style as you continue practicing more with the code. All right, so we got the line containing public class. It's something called class header. And this is what begins class definition. You can see that this is where open bracket, this is where the class begins. And I would say that's where class body begins. And the closing bracket, that's exactly where it ends. And a Java program must have at least one class definition. As your program is going to grow more and more, you will create a lot of different classes and a lot of objects based or created from those classes. So Java program actually comes up to be a program with the class interaction. So one class is going to communicate with another class in some kind of way. Public over here on top. Public is a Java keyword, and it always must be written in a lowercase. It has it's something called access specifier, and in this case, it means that everyone from anyone using this class will have a complete access to it. There are no restrictions. The following word is the class. The class is just a Java keyword written in lowercase, and this is what's really beginning class definition. And so the next one is something called programmer defined name. Sometimes it's called identifiers, sometimes it's called variables. So for example, this you got hello world, and notice that it actually matches your file name. So when you have public class hello world, then your file name must be hello world as well. We'll focus on this in a little bit. And you can see that this hello world class is, like I said before, it could be hello world 1, 2, and 3. This kind of classes could be they're just created by the programmer. And hello world is a class name. This name was given by programmers. The name can be in lowercase, uppercase, or a mixture. Sometimes we refer to it as a camel case. In this particular case, NetBeans automatically assigned the name of the class based on the project name. So, for example, when you give it name, when you start the project and you give it a name of Hello World, it automatically creates a default package with the Hello World as a file name and Hello World as a class name. There can be more than one class in a single Java file. So, for example, at this point, it's only one, but you can imagine creating additional classes. But there can only be one public class. And when Java has a public class, the name of the public class must match the name of the file. That's why we got, like I mentioned before, we have public class hello world matches exactly hello world.java. All the code within the brackets is the body of the class, something I mentioned before. And once you have, anytime you have an open bracket, it must be a matching closed bracket. The next line of code we are going to be talking about is line 10, and this is where we have first method. So this method belongs to hello world class, and you know it because it's within the class body. And in this point, the method is called or is named main. Okay, and the public static void main, and we got string args in parentheses. This is a method header marking beginning of a method. At this moment, we will only focus on the method name main, and we are going to skip explanation for public static void and all these keywords for the later in the later tutorials. Every Java application must have a method name. Main is the entry point of any Java program. And here we will create a simple program to display hello world on the screen. So to do that, I'm going to start on a couple of things. So first of all, we are going to print out a statement to see it on display on our screen. So first of all, we're going to type in something called system. And let me just finish that writing and explain what this means in a moment. And we are going to say hello world. And so system over here in the beginning, this is a class, part of a Java API. It contains you can imagine contains a lot of objects, a lot of methods, just like pretty much anything in Java. And one of them is out. So we start with the system out, and usually we refer to it as system.out.println. The out object apparently contains two methods. One of them is print, and another one is println, the one that we used here. Both of these methods display a console output, which is just a plain text. The println, just like we typed here, it just prints the value, whichever value we pass to it. In this case, it's going to be hello world, and it's going to move the cursor to the new line. If you just use the print method, not println, but just print method, instead it will print just the value, but it's not going to move the cursor to the new line. So let's run this application and let's see it in action. So for example, right now we got hello world. I'm just gonna click run over here, and you can see it shows hello world, and then it says build successful message on a new line. Let's see what would be the difference if we would just use hello world, but with another method, print method. So just to see the difference, on one we're going to use hello world 1, and on the second one we'll use hello world 2. And what I can do is in NetBeans, I can do control and space. So hold control, hit space, and NetBeans go ahead and suggests me some other ways of kind of like autofill data. So, and I can just go ahead and select. Okay, it doesn't show me println, but that's okay. I'll just change println to print, and I say hello world 2. Save and run. So now you can see that hello world 1, it uses new line kind of print, and it moves the cursor to the new line. That's where hello world 2 begins. But hello world 2 doesn't have this new line character, and it just appends build successful message right under, so it doesn't basically add up that new line character. Also, println method can also be used without parameters, just to position the cursor on the next line. So for example, if you do something like this, so after this printout, we can just add another one, and we can just remove any text from inside of it, and let's run. And you can see that this kind of statement creates a new line character after hello world 2. Note that a set of characters is printed without quotation marks. So you would ask, why there are quotation marks here, and in a printout we don't get quotation marks. And the reason it happens because the characters inside quotation marks is something called string literal. And notice that also there is a semicolon in the end of the statement over here, but as you continue learning, not all lines will have a semicolon in the end. So for example, we got the class, and notice in the bottom here we don't have a semicolon. So a couple of notes on comment. For example, one right here, or we can add. So notice this is there are actually a couple of comment types. So you can see it like this one allows us to do multiple comment over multiple lines. If you just want to comment out, do simple comment over just one line. So we could just say something like simple Java program. So whenever you have those two forward slashes, this text is just going to be ignored by Java compiler. which is used to compile a program. So for example, if I just click run, obviously none of this text would show up. For better code readability, it's good practice to comment out your code. The comments can be anywhere in the program, and the line should begin with the 2 slashes. Compiler will ignore the code from the double slash to the end of the line. So for example, it's going to start here and it's going to ignore everything on this line up until you finish word program. As the complexity of the program increases, code comments will help you or others to better understand the code you have written, and it's going to definitely make it more readable. And obviously I can put it anywhere, it's just fine, or whatever place it would go to, as long as you have 2 double slashes in front of a line. So the next step is to, and I would say the next part of the tutorial would be create a simple program just to calculate the user's gross pay. So let me go ahead and remove those comments just to clean this area. And we will need to use something called variables. A variable is a named storage location in computer's random access memory. As the program is running, the variable may change over time, and we will use the input of an integer number. So since we are going to calculate gross pay, we need 2 main values. One is going to be hours worked, and the second one is pay rate for a single hour. So we will use the input of integer number of hours worked. So in this case, we can put the integer in Java is something called int. So we don't say full word integer, it's just int. And the next one for variable, it's a programmer independent kind of word. So for example, I could say int hours. You can name it anything you want. And so let's say in a week we work 40 hours on average. So we got 40 hours, and the next one is going to be decimal value for hourly pay rate. So for example, it could be like $20.19 or whatever. So I'm just going to refer to it as the decimal number is, there are a couple of, I would say, floating type of values, but in this case we are going to be using double. And again, it's just an example of a floating number. We have a float, we have other ones to work with, but we'll talk about those numbers later on. And this is going to be a pay rate. So pay rate, let's say $25 per hour. Could be more, could be less. And obviously all the variables must be declared before they could be used. So you can see that over here I have integer for hours, because usually we don't provide hour. We could technically provide with decimal points half an hour or whatever, but in this case we're just going to make it as simple as possible just to show you variety. Integer for hours, and it's going to be 40 hours per week. And pay rate is going to be decimal value. So for example, $25 per hour. So now that the goal is to calculate gross pay, we will calculate gross pay by multiplying a number of hours worked by hourly pay rate and assign the value to the new identifier. So since we are trying to get a gross pay, we are going to define another variable. And again, that number is a decimal value, because again, it could be dollars and cents or whatever currency you are using. So we once again are going to refer to it as a double gross pay. And again, it depends on what you want to call it. It's absolutely your choice. And we are going to assign multiplication to it of two variables. It's just number of hours multiplied by pay rate, by the amount paid in an hour. So hours multiply by pay rate. By the way, notice that I'm using the spaces over here. You don't have to do the spaces. You can just type as is. You can even type in on a new line, because what happens is all of this is going to get complete calculation, and it's basically, it consider this, it basically looks at it as just one line, but it's because it's a single statement. And notice that eventually it's getting terminated by semicolon. So this is how we know that this is the actual end of the statement. So I'm just going to, for clarity, I'm going to remove this, and now we get a gross pay. Just a couple of things here. So we've been using operators. The basic operators here is equal sign and multiplication sign. So operator could be symbol or a word that perform operation on one or more operands. So for example, in this case, operand would be hours and pay rate. And operate is usually data, could be a number, for example, in this case. Assignment operator, as you can see here, it's a usual equal sign. It takes the value on the right side of the expression. So for example, in this case, we got hours multiplied by pay rate, and stores it in the variable on the left side of the expression. So at this point, the gross pay is hours multiplied by pay rate. Alternatively, you could say that hours multiplied by pay rate is assigned to gross pay variable. And now we are going to show the statement on the screen. So just like we did before, we are going to be using class from Java API system, and again it's system print system.out, and we are going to be printing this text. Okay, and now there are a couple of things that you could do here. So before we actually mentioned that you could use like a text, right? It just could be a text, basically like something called like example gross pay, and we could just display it on the screen. And basically this would just print gross pay without anything else. Notice that I could basically type in anything I want, but I just don't want to say gross pay and finish the sentence. I want to say gross pay is given and basically add or append gross pay digit, that decimal to that statement. So in order for me to do that, I could literally do it in a couple of ways. For example, I could create another system out println statement, maybe this combination of just system out that print. So, but in this case, it's gonna get cluttered. So what Java allows us to do instead is to concatenate. So for example, right now you have a text. It could concatenate different texts. So for example, you could say something, the blah 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 here, or it actually even allows us to concatenate the number. So for example, we got gross pay on line 14. So what we could do is we could just literally type in gross pay as part of that statement. So this print statement is going to display a message containing the gross pay, and the plus operator used with string is something called string concatenation operator, because it actually does concatenate string, and string is something called text. Concatenation means appending one string to another, but more interestingly is that not only strings that could be appended to each other. So the variable, even a number, could be concatenated to a string. The only difference is that these numbers that you see here, it's actually getting converted by compiler to the string. And eventually you got string 1 for gross pay, and you got this text on the left, gross pay is, and it's going to get appended to one another. And basically we got, so let's save it and run. And as you would expect, the numbers would calculate, and it would just say gross pay is 1,000. Okay, and also it has a dollar sign, which is very nice. So in this basic tutorial, we spoke about, we actually covered some very basic but very important points being covered in this tutorial. So first of all, let's actually do a quick roundup of the concepts that we've been covering. So what I'm going to be doing is, if I'm using / and then I'm going to be using 2 asterisks, and then I press enter in NetBeans, it actually creates a multi-character, multi-line comment. Okay, so just a few points just to wrap everything up. So number one is, we know that Java is case sensitive, and that means that if you have 2 words, one with uppercase and the second one in lowercase, for example, if you have something like public versus public, even though they sound the same, they read them the same, but capital P and lowercase p and uppercase key makes a huge difference. They're absolutely different things. So public could be defined by the user, but this kind of public, we know it's a keyword which cannot be used just anywhere. It has to be used by in a specific purpose. So the next one is, the next point is, all Java programs contain code stored in Java files. So all of the source code, so for example, right now we only have hello world.java, but it again could be hello world 1.java, it could be basically anything.java. And all of this source code, majority of your source code would actually be inside of a Java class. So the next one is comments. Compiler ignores comments. It can be placed anywhere in the code. So comments can go anywhere, and you can see that right now I'm typing my comments in the end. In the end of the class, it's written at the beginning of the class. Could be in this function or method, official code in Java. So this is about comments. The next point is, it's about public class and Java file. So for example, a Java file can contain many classes. So for example, I could do something like this. I could say, so this is about public classes and class names. I'm not gonna go ahead and type too much detail about it, but basically, as of right now, we have a public class hello world. You could go ahead and name another class, hello class hello world 2, and see, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't give me any error messages. But notice what's going to happen is, if I'm going to be using public class hello world 3, oops, misbound, hello world 3, and take a look. Now the NetBeans complains. The reason being is the two public named classes cannot go into the same file, and that's actually very important. So I'll go ahead and remove public, and note, I apologize, should be braces, just like this, okay? And just to prove the point before, we got public. See, now it complains because it doesn't take another public class. We already have one public class, so we're gonna go ahead and remove it. And now we are back to normal. So just a couple of things here. Java file can contain many classes, but only one public class. And notice that most importantly is that Java file must have the same file name as the public class name. So for example, you can see that this is hello world Java, and over here we have public class hello world. They are absolutely matching each other. So for example, if I make let me do a little bit of change. I'm going to say public class hello world 2. Okay, and now that's a problem because even if I change this to default class, see, it still gives us a problem because let's take a look what NetBeans tells us. Class hello world 2 is public, should be declared in a file named hello world 2. So that brings us to the point that Java file must have the same file name as the public class name. So let me just undo this change, and now we'll be back to normal. Next, the next point was about main method, and every Java application must have a main method, and this is the entry point. So I would say main method is the entry point to Java application. Okay, so it's going to be an entry point of the application. Okay, next. 6th point. Once you have opening brace, whether it's a method, so for example here, whether it's a class, it must have its matching closing brace. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So for example, if you do skip one of them, it's going to complain on the following lines. So you just have to make sure that there is a closing bracket for that class. Same goes for the method. It's opened, and now it's closed, and the problem is resolved. Okay, so just make sure that once you have open bracket, you must have closed one as well. And that brings us to the last comment, is about punctuation. Punctuation is also crucial to Java program, just like in English language. For example, we just for now we discussed a couple of points. So for example, the main focus to know right now is semicolon. Semicolon is always in the end of the statement. So for example, every statement should terminate with a colon. There are a couple of exceptions to it. So for example, if it's a comment, just like here, it doesn't matter if I'm going to put semicolon because compiler is still going to ignore it. So if I just put it, there is no effect. You could do it with the single line comment as well. It doesn't matter what goes in a comment. So the semicolon is not needed. Also, if you have a class method header, or so let's say class header, like over here, we're not going to put it here or here. So this is also an exception. It's just not a statement. Same goes with the braces. Once you have some languages to do, you use something like that. Well, see, at this point, it actually does not complain because it actually thinks that there is a line, but there is nothing there. But obviously, we're not going to put it. You can just do opening bracket and closing bracket, and that should be it.